The champagne glass fell from Naomi Thompson's fingers in slow motion, crystal shattering against the marble floor of the grand ballroom. The sound should have been loud enough to stop everything, but the 200 guests continued cheering as her husband of 8 years slipped a massive diamond ring onto another woman's finger. Brandon was on one knee in the center of the room, his face glowing with joy as he looked up at Rebecca Harrison, his boss. The same Rebecca who had been calling him for emergency meetings every weekend for the past 6 months. The same Rebecca who had insisted on this company celebration tonight, telling everyone it would be unforgettable. Say yes. Say yes, the crowd chanted, thinking this was all part of some elaborate corporate presentation. After all, Rebecca Harrison was the CEO of Harrison Industries, and Brandon was her rising star executive. Nobody questioned why the company's biggest celebration would include a marriage proposal. Nobody except Naomi, who stood frozen behind a marble pillar, watching her entire world crumble. Rebecca's perfectly manicured hand touched Brandon's face as she said yes, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've been waiting for this moment for so long," she whispered, but Naomi heard every word. She had moved closer without thinking, drawn by the horrible fascination of watching her life end. The crowd erupted again. Glasses clinked. Someone started playing romantic music. Naomi felt like she was drowning in the middle of a celebration. Brandon stood up and pulled Rebecca into his arms, spinning her around as photographers captured every moment. His eyes swept the crowd, taking in all the congratulatory faces, and for just a second they landed on Naomi. Their eyes met across the room. For that instant she saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Fear? But then Rebecca pulled his attention back to her, and he was smiling again, accepting handshakes and back pats from colleagues. Naomi backed away from the pillar, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She looked down at her own hands, at her simple wedding ring that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 8 years. 8 years of marriage, and this was how it ended? Not with a conversation or even a fight, but with a public humiliation disguised as a celebration? She thought about all the times Brandon had come home late, smelling like expensive perfume he claimed was from client meetings. All the business trips that got extended at the last minute. All the times he had pushed her away when she tried to be affectionate, claiming he was stressed about work. Now she understood. He hadn't been stressed about work. He had been planning this. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was how elaborate this whole thing was. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. This was calculated. Planned. Rebecca had organized this entire company event just so she could have the perfect setting for her proposal. And Brandon had gone along with it, knowing his wife was in the audience. Naomi looked around the room at all the familiar faces. These were people she had entertained in her home. People she had cooked for during Brandon's business dinners. People who knew she existed, knew she was married to Brandon, and yet not one of them seemed confused by what they had just witnessed. That's when the horrible truth hit her. They all knew. Every single person in this room knew about Brandon and Rebecca, and she was the only one who had been living in the dark. A waiter approached her with a concerned look. "Ma'am, are you all right? You look pale." Naomi opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. What was she supposed to say? That she had just watched her husband propose to another woman? That her entire life had been a lie? Instead, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step felt like it took tremendous effort, like she was walking through deep water. Behind her, the celebration continued. Someone was making a toast now, talking about love and commitment and new beginnings. As she reached the hotel lobby, Naomi caught sight of herself in the large mirrors that lined the walls. She looked like a ghost. Her beautiful brown skin had gone ashen, and her eyes looked hollow. The black cocktail dress she had chosen so carefully for tonight hung on her frame like mourning clothes. She pulled out her phone to call an Uber, but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely touch the screen. The betrayal was one thing, but the public humiliation was something else entirely. Brandon hadn't just cheated on her. He had made her a fool in front of everyone they knew. But as she stood there in that empty hotel lobby, listening to the distant sounds of celebration from the ballroom, something besides grief began to grow inside her chest. It started small, like a tiny flame, but it was getting stronger with each passing second. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that makes people do stupid things. This was cold and clear and sharp as glass. Brandon thought he could discard her like an old piece of furniture. He thought he could humiliate her and walk away without consequences. He was wrong. Naomi sat in the back of the Uber, staring out at the city lights blurring past. The driver had tried to make conversation at first, commenting on her elegant dress and asking if she had been to a nice event. When she didn't respond, he turned up the radio and left her alone with her thoughts. She couldn't stop replaying the proposal scene, but now other memories were flooding back too. Memories that painted a very different picture of her marriage than the one she had been living in. She remembered the day she met Brandon at the community center where she volunteered. He had been there for a corporate charity event, looking handsome in his expensive suit and talking about giving back to the community. When he asked for her number, she felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Their dating period had been like a fairy tale. He took her to nice restaurants, brought her flowers, and talked about building a future together. When he proposed after 2 years, it was everything she had dreamed of. Simple but heartfelt, in the park where they had their first picnic. The wedding had been small but perfect. They couldn't afford anything elaborate because Brandon was still finishing his MBA, and Naomi was working 2 jobs to help support them. She didn't mind. She believed they were building something together, that the sacrifices would be worth it when his career took off. And his career had taken off spectacularly. Brandon had gotten hired at Harrison Industries right after graduation, and Rebecca Harrison had immediately taken him under her wing. She promoted him quickly, gave him the best assignments, and included him in high-level meetings that were usually reserved for much senior employees. At the time, Naomi had been proud of her husband's success. She thought he was just naturally gifted, that Rebecca recognized his talent. Now she realized the truth was much simpler and much more painful. The promotions hadn't been about Brandon's business skills. They had been about something else entirely. Naomi thought about all the company parties she had attended over the years, standing beside Brandon as he networked and climbed the corporate ladder. Rebecca had always been polite to her, but there had been something in her eyes that Naomi couldn't quite identify. Now she knew what it was. Rebecca had been sizing up the competition. The Uber pulled up to their house in the suburbs. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy but comfortable. They had bought it 3 years ago when Brandon's salary got big enough to qualify for the mortgage. Naomi had spent hours decorating it, trying to make it feel like home. She had painted every room herself, planted the garden, and carefully chosen every piece of furniture. Now, looking at it from the street, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage set for a play she hadn't known she was acting in. She paid the driver and walked up the front steps, her key feeling foreign in the lock. Inside, everything looked exactly the same as it had this morning when she was getting ready for the party. Her coffee cup was still in the sink. Brandon's gym clothes were still draped over the chair where he had left them. This morning, she had been a wife getting ready for her husband's company celebration. Tonight, she was a woman whose marriage had just ended in the most public way possible. Naomi walked through the house, looking at everything with new eyes. The wedding photos on the mantel seemed to mock her now. In every picture, Brandon was smiling, but she could see now that the smile didn't reach his eyes. How long had he been pretending? How long had she been living with a stranger? She went upstairs to their bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed they had shared for 8 years. The room smelled like Brandon's cologne and she felt sick. Everything here was contaminated now by the knowledge of his betrayal. Her phone buzzed. A text message from her best friend Jerome. "Hey girl, how was the fancy party? Did Brandon's boss give him that promotion he was hoping for?" Naomi stared at the message, not knowing how to respond. Jerome had been her friend since childhood, and he had never really liked Brandon. He had never said anything directly, but she could tell he thought Brandon was too focused on status and money. Jerome was a lawyer now, successful in his own right, but he still lived in the same neighborhood where they had grown up. He had never forgotten where he came from. She started to type a response several times but deleted each one. How do you tell someone that your entire life has just fallen apart? How do you admit that you were stupid enough not to see what everyone else apparently knew? Instead, she turned off her phone and went to the bathroom to wash off her makeup. The woman looking back at her in the mirror looked older than she had this morning. The stress and shock had carved new lines around her eyes, and her usual confident posture was gone. As she wiped away her mascara, she thought about all the time she had put her own dreams on hold for Brandon's career. She had been accepted to graduate school for social work, but she had deferred when Brandon got the job at Harrison Industries because they needed her income to stay stable while he established himself. She had been planning to reapply this year, finally ready to pursue her own goals now that Brandon was making good money. But every time she brought it up, he found a reason why it wasn't the right time. There was always another promotion he was working toward, another opportunity that required his full focus. Now she understood why he had been so eager to keep her occupied with other things. A wife in graduate school might ask too many questions about his long hours and frequent trips. A wife focused on her own career might notice when her husband started coming home smelling like another woman's perfume. Naomi looked at her reflection one more time, and this time she saw something different. The hurt was still there and the betrayal, but underneath it was something stronger. She was 32 years old, beautiful, intelligent, and talented. She had spent 8 years building someone else's dream, but that didn't mean her own dreams were dead. Brandon thought he could throw her away like an old newspaper, but he was about to learn something about the woman he had underestimated for so long. Naomi woke up on the couch at 6 in the morning, still wearing her cocktail dress from the night before. Her neck was stiff and her mouth felt like cotton, but her mind was crystal clear. She had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened. Brandon still wasn't home. She checked her phone and found 3 missed calls from him, all from around midnight, and 2 text messages. The first one said, "Where did you go? People were asking about you." The second one, sent an hour later, said, "Rebecca and I had to stay late for business discussions. I'll be home in the morning." Even now, even after proposing to another woman in front of 200 people, he was still lying to her. Naomi deleted the messages without responding and went upstairs to shower. She needed to wash off the smell of that hotel ballroom and the memory of watching her husband betray her. Under the hot water, she finally let herself cry. Not the desperate, hysterical crying she had expected, but quiet tears that felt like a release. She was getting dressed when she heard Brandon's car in the driveway. Her stomach clenched, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had spent the night thinking about this moment, about what she would say and how she would handle it. The front door opened and she heard his footsteps on the stairs. He appeared in the bedroom doorway looking rumpled and tired, his tuxedo wrinkled like he had slept in it. "There you are," he said, trying to sound casual. "I was worried when I couldn't find you last night. Where did you go?" Naomi finished putting on her earrings and turned to face him. "I left early. I wasn't feeling well." Brandon nodded, looking relieved that she wasn't screaming or throwing things. "The party ran really late. Lots of networking opportunities. Rebecca introduced me to some major clients." "I'm sure she did." He started loosening his tie, completely oblivious to the edge in her voice. "You should have stayed. Some of those people could have been good connections for you too. Rebecca was asking about your volunteer work." Naomi almost laughed at the audacity. Rebecca had been asking about her? What exactly had she wanted to know about the woman whose husband she had just stolen? What exactly did Rebecca want to know about me? Brandon paused with his tie halfway off. "Just general stuff. She thinks it's great that you're so involved in the community. She was saying how lucky I am to have such a supportive wife." The word wife hit Naomi like a slap. She wondered if Rebecca had said that before or after Brandon put the ring on her finger. "How long has this been going on, Brandon?" He froze completely now, his hand still gripping his tie. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." For a moment she thought he might actually tell her the truth. She saw something flicker across his face, a moment of what might have been shame or fear. But then his expression hardened, and she realized he was going to keep lying even now. "Naomi, you're being paranoid. Last night was a business event. If you had stayed, you would have understood that." She stared at him in amazement. He was really going to pretend that nothing had happened. He was going to look her in the eye and lie about something she had witnessed with her own eyes. "I saw you propose to her, Brandon." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Brandon's face went completely white, and for a second he looked like he might collapse. Then he started scrambling. It wasn't what it looked like. It was a publicity stunt for the company. Rebecca wanted to generate buzz for the new marketing campaign. Naomi had been prepared for him to deny it, but she hadn't expected him to insult her intelligence quite this blatantly. A publicity stunt that required you to put a real diamond ring on her finger and tell her you'd been waiting for this moment? You don't understand the business world, Naomi. Sometimes you have to do things that look one way but are really something else entirely. She almost felt sorry for him. He was so desperate to maintain his lies that he was willing to say anything, no matter how ridiculous it sounded. "So you're telling me that you got down on one knee in front of 200 people, proposed to your boss with what looked like a real engagement ring, and it was all just pretend?" "Exactly. It was Rebecca's idea. She thought it would get people talking about the company." Naomi walked to her dresser and started putting her jewelry away, each movement calm and deliberate. "Where did you sleep last night, Brandon?" "At the office. Rebecca and I had to debrief about the event and plan our next moves." "With her wearing your engagement ring?" Brandon was sweating now, realizing that every answer he gave was digging him deeper into the hole. It's a prop, Naomi. It's not real. She turned back to face him, and something in her expression must have warned him that his lies weren't working. Show me your phone. What? If this is all innocent business stuff, show me your phone. Show me your text messages with Rebecca. Show me your call log. Brandon's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't have to prove anything to you. You're my wife. You should trust me. I was your wife, Naomi said quietly. But I don't think I am anymore. The truth of those words hit both of them at the same time. Brandon's face crumpled, and for a moment she thought he was going to confess everything. Instead he got angry. This is ridiculous. You're being completely irrational. 1 minute you're worried about nothing, and the next minute you're talking like our marriage is over. Our marriage ended last night when you proposed to another woman. The only question now is whether you're going to keep lying about it or finally tell me the truth. Brandon stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing his options. Finally he seemed to make a decision. Fine. You want the truth? Rebecca and I have developed feelings for each other. But nothing physical has happened between us. Last night was just, we got caught up in the moment. Even his confession was a lie. Naomi could see it in his eyes, hear it in his voice. He was still trying to minimize what he had done, still trying to make it sound like some innocent mistake instead of the calculated betrayal it actually was. But she had heard enough. She picked up her purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? Out. I need some air. Naomi, wait. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. She paused at the bedroom door and looked back at him. He looked pathetic standing there in his wrinkled tuxedo, still trying to convince her that black was white. No, Brandon. We can't work this out. Some things can't be fixed. Naomi drove aimlessly around the city for hours, not ready to go back home but not sure where else to go. She finally ended up at Jerome's law office, even though it was Saturday and she knew he probably wouldn't be there. To her surprise, his car was in the parking lot. She found him in his office, surrounded by case files and legal documents, reading glasses perched on his nose. When he looked up and saw her face, he immediately pushed his work aside. What happened? The whole story came pouring out. Jerome listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. I never liked that man, but even I didn't think he was capable of something like this. I feel so stupid, Jerome. How did I not see it? Because you loved him and you trusted him. That doesn't make you stupid. That makes you human. Jerome made her tea and ordered Chinese food, and they spent the afternoon talking through everything. He helped her understand her legal options and made a list of practical things she needed to do. Find a divorce attorney, separate their finances, figure out where she was going to live. You can stay with me as long as you need to, he offered. I've got plenty of space. Naomi appreciated the offer, but she wasn't ready to make any big decisions yet. She needed to go home and start figuring out what came next. She also needed to face Brandon again and have the conversation they should have had this morning. When she got back to the house, Brandon's car was gone. She found a note on the kitchen counter, gone to think about things. We'll talk when I get back. I love you. Too little, too late, she thought, crumpling up the note. The house felt different now that she knew the truth. Every room held memories that had been poisoned by Brandon's betrayal. The kitchen where she had cooked him dinner every night. The living room where they had watched movies together. The bedroom where she had believed they were building a life together. Naomi decided to start packing some of her things, just in case she decided to take Jerome up on his offer to stay with him. She went upstairs to get her suitcases from the attic storage area. The attic was dusty and cramped, filled with boxes they had moved from their old apartment but never unpacked. As she pulled down the suitcases, one of the boxes tipped over, spilling papers across the floor. She bent down to clean up the mess and froze. Among the scattered documents was an envelope with her name written in handwriting she didn't recognize. The return address said, Patterson and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Naomi picked up the envelope with shaking hands. It was postmarked from 2 years ago, right around her 30th birthday. She had never seen it before. Inside was a letter that made her heart race. Dear Miss Thompson, we represent the estate of Mrs. Evelyn Richardson, your maternal grandmother. Mrs. Richardson passed away 5 years ago and left specific instructions that you be contacted on your 30th birthday regarding her estate. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss your inheritance. Due to the substantial nature of the estate, we strongly recommend scheduling an appointment in person. The estate has been held in trust and has continued to grow through careful investments. Current estimated value is approximately $150 million. Sincerely, Patricia Patterson, estate attorney. Naomi read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. Her grandmother had left her $150 million and she was just finding out about it now? She tried to remember her grandmother, but she only had vague memories of a stern woman who had visited a few times when Naomi was very young. Her mother had never talked much about her own mother, just saying that they hadn't been close. With trembling fingers, Naomi pulled out her phone and called the number on the letterhead. An answering service picked up, but when she explained who she was, they immediately patched her through to Patricia Patterson herself. Miss Thompson, I've been wondering what happened to you. We sent that letter 2 years ago and never heard back. I never received it. I found it in a box in my attic. Is this real? Did my grandmother really leave me money? Oh my dear, it's very real. And it's much more than just money. Your grandmother was a remarkable businesswoman. She built a small investment company into a major operation. When she died, she left everything to you with very specific instructions. Naomi's legs felt weak. She sat down on a dusty box. What kind of instructions? She wanted to make sure you were mature enough to handle the responsibility, so she set up a trust that you could access starting on your 30th birthday. She also wanted to make sure you weren't being manipulated by anyone who might be after your money. The irony wasn't lost on Naomi. Her grandmother had been trying to protect her from gold diggers, but the letter had never reached her. Where was the letter supposed to be sent? To your address at the time. Let me check. It was sent to 428 Maple Street, apartment 3B. That was their old apartment, the one they had moved out of shortly after her 30th birthday. The letter must have been forwarded to their new house and gotten mixed up with their moving boxes. Miss Patterson, you said the estate was worth $150 million 2 years ago. What's it worth now? With the investments we've made according to your grandmother's guidelines, it's now worth approximately $180 million. And that's not including the real estate holdings and the investment company itself. Naomi felt like she was dreaming. This morning she had been a betrayed wife with no money and nowhere to go. Now she was apparently worth more money than she could even comprehend. I need to see you as soon as possible. Of course. Can you come in Monday morning? I have so much to show you. Your grandmother left detailed letters explaining everything she wanted you to know. After hanging up, Naomi sat in the dusty attic, holding the letter and trying to process what had just happened. Her entire life had just changed again, but this time it was in a way she never could have imagined. She thought about Brandon's betrayal, about the humiliation of last night, about feeling powerless and discarded. But she wasn't powerless at all. She was one of the wealthiest women in the state and Brandon had no idea. A slow smile spread across her face. Brandon thought he could trade her in for his boss and her corporate connections. He thought Naomi was just some ordinary woman who would quietly disappear while he started his new life. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Monday morning couldn't come fast enough. Naomi had spent the weekend in a strange state of shock, alternating between disbelief about her inheritance and anger about Brandon's betrayal. Brandon had come home Sunday night, trying to act normal and talking about working through their problems, but she barely listened to him. She had a bigger conversation to prepare for. The law offices of Patterson and Associates were in downtown's financial district, in a building that screamed old money and established power. Patricia Patterson turned out to be a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that reminded Naomi of her grandmother. You look just like Evelyn did at your age, Patricia said as she led Naomi to a conference room. She would be so proud to see the woman you've become. I wish I had known her better. My mother never talked about her much. Patricia's expression grew sad. Your grandmother regretted that estrangement deeply. That's part of why she was so determined to leave everything to you. She wanted to make sure the family legacy continued. The conference room table was covered with documents, photographs, and thick folders. Patricia poured coffee and settled in across from Naomi. Let me start with the basics. Your grandmother, Evelyn Richardson, started with nothing. She was a single mother who built Richardson Investments from the ground up. By the time she died, it was one of the most successful investment firms in the region. Patricia opened one of the folders and showed Naomi financial statements that made her head spin. Properties, stock portfolios, business holdings, the numbers were staggering. The current total value of your inheritance is $183 million and growing. But it's not just about the money, Naomi. Your grandmother built something important, and she wanted you to carry it forward. She handed Naomi a sealed envelope. This is for you. Evelyn wrote it shortly before she died. With shaking hands, Naomi opened the envelope and began to read her grandmother's letter. My dearest Naomi, if you're reading this, it means you've finally learned about your inheritance. I'm sorry for the secrecy, but I wanted to protect you from the kind of people who see dollar signs instead of the wonderful person you are. I know your mother and I had our differences, but they were never about you. I loved you from the moment you were born, and I've been watching your life from a distance. I'm proud of the woman you've become, your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. I built this company not just to make money, but to have something meaningful to pass down to you. Richardson Investments has always been about more than profit. We invest in companies that make the world better, that treat their employees well, that contribute to their communities. I hope you'll continue that tradition, but I also hope you'll make it your own. This is your inheritance to do with as you see fit. You don't owe anyone anything, not me, not your mother, and certainly not anyone who might try to manipulate you for your money. Be careful who you trust, but don't be afraid to trust at all. The right people will love you for who you are, not what you have. Live boldly, my dear granddaughter. You have the resources now to make any dream come true. All my love, Grandmother Evelyn. Naomi wiped away tears as she finished reading. Her grandmother had known her better than she had realized. There's more, Patricia said gently. Your grandmother left specific instructions about what should happen if you were ever in an abusive relationship or if someone was trying to take advantage of you financially. What kind of instructions? She set up legal and financial protections. Hidden assets, offshore accounts, safety nets that would make sure you could always walk away from a bad situation with your independence intact. Naomi thought about Brandon, about how he had controlled their finances and made all the major decisions about their life together. Her grandmother had somehow anticipated that she might need an escape route. Patricia, I need to ask you something. If I wanted to take action against someone who had betrayed me, what kind of resources do I have access to? Patricia's eyes sharpened with interest. What kind of action are we talking about? Naomi told her about Brandon and Rebecca, about the affair and the public humiliation. As she talked, Patricia took notes, her expression growing more serious. Your husband doesn't know about the inheritance? He has no idea. He thinks I'm just a broke wife who depends on him for everything. Good. That gives us advantages. Tell me about his company, about this Rebecca woman. For the next hour, they discussed Harrison Industries, Rebecca's position, and what Naomi knew about the company's finances. Patricia made more notes and asked detailed questions. I'll need to do some research, but there are several ways we could approach this. Your grandmother's company has connections throughout the business world. We could buy stock in Harrison Industries, we could investigate their business practices, we could even position you to make a takeover bid if the circumstances were right. Naomi felt a thrill of excitement. For the first time since Saturday night, she felt like she had some control over her situation. I want them to pay for what they did to me. Not just Brandon but Rebecca too. They humiliated me in front of everyone we know. They made me feel worthless and powerless. And now you're neither worthless nor powerless, Patricia said with a smile that reminded Naomi of her grandmother. You're one of the most powerful women in this city, and they have no idea what's coming. They spent the rest of the morning going through paperwork and setting up accounts. By lunchtime, Naomi had access to more money than she had ever dreamed of. But more importantly, she had a plan. There's one more thing, Patricia said as they finished up. Your grandmother left you a house. It's been maintained by a property management company all these years, waiting for you. She handed Naomi an address in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. It's fully furnished and ready for you to move in whenever you're ready. Naomi looked at the address and felt another piece of her new life falling into place. She wouldn't be staying with Jerome or begging Brandon for a place to live. She had her own mansion waiting for her. As she left the law office, Naomi felt like a completely different person than the woman who had walked in that morning. She was still hurt by Brandon's betrayal, but she was no longer powerless. She had resources now and she had a plan. Brandon and Rebecca thought they had won. They thought they could discard her and move on with their lives without consequences. They were about to learn how expensive their betrayal was going to be. The house, no, the mansion that her grandmother had left her was everything Naomi could have dreamed of. Situated on 3 acres in the city's most prestigious neighborhood, it was a stunning example of classical architecture with modern updates throughout. The property management company had maintained it perfectly, and it was ready for her to move in immediately. Standing in the grand foyer with its crystal chandelier and marble floors, Naomi felt her grandmother's presence. This wasn't just a house, it was a statement. A declaration that the Richardson women were forces to be reckoned with. She spent Tuesday moving her most important belongings out of the house she had shared with Brandon. He was at work, which made things easier. She left behind most of the furniture and decorations she had chosen so carefully over the years. They belonged to a different life, a life where she had been content to live in someone else's shadow. Jerome helped her move, and his reaction to the mansion was exactly what she had hoped for. "Girl, this place is incredible. Your grandmother had serious taste." "She had serious everything," Naomi replied, looking around the expansive living room. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this." That evening she called Brandon to tell him she had moved out. She kept the conversation brief and factual, offering no details about where she was going or how she could afford it. "Naomi, please. Let's talk about this. I made a mistake, but we can fix it." "There's nothing to fix, Brandon. You made your choice. Where are you staying? Are you at Jerome's?" "I'm somewhere safe. That's all you need to know." Wednesday morning, Naomi met with Patricia again, this time at Richardson Investments. The offices were impressive, modern but sophisticated, with original artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district. "Welcome to your company," Patricia said as they toured the offices. "Your grandmother's team is still here, and they're excited to meet you." The staff turned out to be a mix of seasoned professionals and younger analysts, all of whom had clearly respected Evelyn Richardson deeply. When Patricia introduced Naomi as the new owner, their faces lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Ms. Richardson talked about you all the time," said Robert, the company's senior portfolio manager. "She was so proud of your volunteer work and your commitment to helping others. She always said you would bring a fresh perspective to the company when you were ready," added Lisa, the research director. Naomi spent the morning learning about the company's current investments and strategies. Her grandmother had been right about focusing on socially responsible investing. Richardson Investments had built its reputation on finding companies that were profitable and ethical. "Now," Patricia said when they were back in her office, "let's talk about Harrison Industries." She opened a thick file filled with financial documents and research reports. "I had my team do a deep dive into their business. The results are very interesting. According to the research, Harrison Industries was more successful than it appeared from the outside, but there were some concerning patterns in their financial reports. The company had been making aggressive acquisitions and taking on significant debt to fuel rapid growth. Rebecca Harrison is leveraged to the hilt," Patricia explained. "She's been borrowing against future earnings to fund expansion. It's worked so far, but it's made the company vulnerable." "Vulnerable how?" "If their cash flow gets disrupted or if they lose a few major clients, they could find themselves in serious trouble very quickly. And there are some irregularities in their accounting that suggest they might be inflating their earnings." Naomi studied the reports, her business classes from college coming back to her. "So if someone wanted to put pressure on the company?" "There are several ways to do it. We could short their stock, we could poach their clients, we could even make a hostile takeover bid if we wanted to get aggressive." "What would you recommend?" Patricia smiled. "I think we start subtle and build from there. First, we buy a significant stake in the company. That will give you a seat at the table and access to their internal information. Then we see what we can find." Over the next few days, Naomi threw herself into learning everything she could about business and investing. She read financial reports, studied market trends, and met with various members of her grandmother's team to understand how Richardson Investments operated. She also started making her own investments with her personal funds. She bought real estate, invested in startups run by women and minorities, and set up a charitable foundation focused on supporting victims of domestic abuse and betrayal. Each decision felt empowering. For 8 years, she had let Brandon make all the major financial decisions in their life. Now she was making choices that affected millions of dollars, and she was good at it. By Friday, Richardson Investments had quietly purchased a 15% stake in Harrison Industries, making Naomi one of the company's largest individual shareholders. The purchases had been made through shell companies and investment funds, so neither Brandon nor Rebecca would have any idea who was behind them. "The next board meeting is in 2 weeks, Patricia informed her. "As a major shareholder, you have the right to attend." Naomi felt a thrill of anticipation. In 2 weeks, she would walk into Harrison Industries as an equal, not as Brandon's dependent wife. She would have power and influence that neither Brandon nor Rebecca could ignore. But first, she had some other preparations to make. That weekend, she hired a private investigator to look deeper into Brandon and Rebecca's relationship. She also had her new legal team start drawing up divorce papers and investigating Brandon's assets. The private investigator's initial report was enlightening. Brandon and Rebecca had been having an affair for over a year, not the recent development of feelings that Brandon had claimed. They had been seen together at hotels, restaurants, and business conferences all over the country. Even worse, the investigator had found evidence that Rebecca had been giving Brandon inside information about company deals, allowing him to make personal investments that violated Harrison Industries' ethics policies. They're both guilty of securities fraud, Jerome told her when she showed him the report. This isn't just an affair. This is criminal behavior. Naomi felt a cold satisfaction reading through the evidence. Brandon and Rebecca thought they were so clever, but they had been sloppy. They had left a trail of evidence that could destroy both of their careers. As she sat in her grandmother's study that Sunday evening, surrounded by financial reports and legal documents, Naomi reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, she had been a betrayed wife with no resources and no options. Now she was a powerful businesswoman with the ability to fight back. Brandon had underestimated her completely. He thought she was weak and dependent, someone he could discard without consequences. Rebecca had dismissed her as just another corporate wife, someone too naive to understand how the business world really worked. They were both about to learn how wrong they were. The Harrison Industries board meeting was held in a gleaming conference room on the 40th floor of downtown's newest skyscraper. Naomi arrived early, dressed in a power suit that cost more than Brandon's monthly salary. She had spent the morning with a stylist, making sure she looked like the successful businesswoman she had become. Patricia accompanied her as her legal counsel, and they took seats at the massive mahogany table. The other board members filed in over the next few minutes, mostly older men in expensive suits who clearly weren't expecting any surprises today. Rebecca Harrison entered the room like she owned it, which technically she did. She was tall and blonde, with the kind of confidence that came from years of being the most powerful person in every room. She looked around the table, making eye contact with each board member, and paused when she saw Naomi. "I don't believe we've met," Rebecca said, extending her hand. "Rebecca Harrison, CEO." "Naomi Richardson," Naomi replied, shaking Rebecca's hand with a firm grip. "I represent Richardson Investments." She saw a flicker of confusion cross Rebecca's face. The name Richardson clearly meant something to her, but she couldn't quite place it. "Richardson Investments," Rebecca repeated slowly. "You're our new major shareholder." "That's correct. We purchased a significant stake in your company over the past week." Brandon chose that moment to walk into the conference room, and Naomi had the satisfaction of watching his face go completely white when he saw her. He stopped dead in the doorway, his mouth hanging open. "Brandon," Rebecca said sharply, clearly not pleased with his unprofessional reaction. "Come sit down. We have a meeting to conduct." Brandon stumbled to his seat, his eyes never leaving Naomi's face. She could see him trying to process what was happening, trying to figure out how his estranged wife had ended up in his boss's boardroom. "Before we begin the formal meeting," Naomi said, standing up, "I have some concerns about this company's business practices that I'd like to address." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "My team has conducted a thorough review of Harrison Industries' financial records, and we've discovered some troubling irregularities." The mood in the room shifted immediately. The board members sat up straighter, and Rebecca's confident expression hardened into something more defensive. "What kind of irregularities?" asked one of the board members. Naomi began laying out the evidence her team had gathered. Inflated earnings reports, questionable accounting practices, and most damaging of all, evidence of insider trading involving Rebecca and Brandon. "Our investigation shows that Ms. Harrison has been sharing confidential company information with Mr. Thompson, who has used that information to make personal investments in violation of securities regulations." Brandon looked like he was going to be sick. Rebecca's face had gone from confident to furious. "This is ridiculous," Rebecca snapped. "These allegations are completely unfounded." "Are they?" Naomi asked, pulling out bank statements and trading records. "Because we have documentation of Mr. Thompson making stock purchases just days before Harrison Industries announced major deals that would affect those same stocks." She distributed copies of the evidence to each board member. The room fell silent as they reviewed the documents. "Furthermore," Naomi continued, "we have evidence that Ms. Harrison and Mr. Thompson have been having an inappropriate personal relationship for over a year, which creates additional conflicts of interest." "My personal life is not the board's concern," Rebecca said through gritted teeth. "It is when it affects your professional judgment and leads to violations of securities law," Patricia interjected, speaking for the first time. "Richardson Investments is prepared to file complaints with the SEC and the District Attorney's Office unless this board takes immediate action." The board members were whispering among themselves now, clearly alarmed by what they were hearing. Brandon sat frozen in his chair, looking like he wanted to disappear. What kind of action are you suggesting? Asked the board chairman. We're demanding the immediate resignation of both Ms. Harrison and Mr. Thompson, pending a full investigation by independent auditors. We're also recommending that the board consider new leadership that can restore confidence in this company. This is a hostile takeover disguised as a fraud investigation, Rebecca accused. You're trying to steal my company. I'm trying to protect the shareholders and employees of this company from criminal behavior, Naomi replied calmly. But if you'd prefer to fight this in court and in the press, that's your choice. The board chairman called for a recess, and the members huddled in urgent conversation. Rebecca and Brandon stood in the corner, arguing in whispered tones. Naomi could see Rebecca gesturing angrily and Brandon looking increasingly panicked. When the meeting reconvened, the board chairman looked grim. The board has voted to suspend Ms. Harrison and Mr. Thompson pending an independent investigation. We're also accepting Richardson Investments' offer to provide interim leadership during this transition. Rebecca's face went purple with rage. You can't do this. I built this company. You also nearly destroyed it, the chairman replied. Security will escort you both out. As security guards approached, Rebecca turned to Naomi with pure hatred in her eyes. I don't know who you think you are, but this isn't over. Yes, it is, Naomi said quietly. It's completely over. Brandon finally found his voice as the security guards reached his chair. Naomi, please. We need to talk. No, we don't. My lawyers will handle everything from here. She watched with satisfaction as both Brandon and Rebecca were escorted from the boardroom like common criminals. The board members were already discussing the transition plan, and several of them approached Naomi to thank her for bringing the issues to their attention. As she left the building that afternoon, Naomi felt a sense of completion she hadn't expected. The public humiliation Brandon and Rebecca had subjected her to had been repaid in kind. They had lost everything: their jobs, their reputations, and their future together. But more importantly, Naomi had proven to herself that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just a victim of their betrayal. She was a force to be reckoned with. The next morning, news of the shakeup at Harrison Industries was front-page business news. The headlines mentioned securities fraud, an FBI investigation, and the mysterious new investor who had exposed the scandal. Naomi smiled as she read the articles over coffee in her grandmother's sunroom. Richardson Investments was about to become much more famous, and she was just getting started. 3 months had passed since Naomi's dramatic boardroom confrontation, and Harrison Industries was in the midst of a complete transformation. The FBI investigation had found extensive evidence of the securities fraud that Naomi had uncovered, and both Rebecca and Brandon were facing criminal charges. But Naomi wasn't content to simply watch from the sidelines. She had spent the past 3 months carefully orchestrating the next phase of her plan. The final vote is tomorrow, Patricia informed her as they sat in Naomi's new corner office at Harrison Industries. As the interim CEO, Naomi had completely reorganized the company's operations and culture. Are we confident about the numbers? Very confident. Between the shares we already own and the proxies we've collected from other investors, we have more than enough votes to complete the acquisition. Tomorrow, the Harrison Industries board would vote on Richardson Investments' offer to buy the remaining shares of the company. If the vote passed, Naomi would become the sole owner of her ex-husband's former workplace. The irony wasn't lost on her. Brandon had spent 8 years climbing the corporate ladder at Harrison Industries, sacrificing his marriage and his integrity to advance his career. Now Naomi owned the entire company. She had spent the 3 months since taking over making sweeping changes. The company's culture of backstabbing and corner-cutting was replaced with transparency and ethical business practices. She had fired several executives who had been complicit in Rebecca's schemes and promoted deserving employees who had been overlooked. Most importantly, she had restructured the company's investment strategy to align with Richardson Investments' focus on socially responsible business practices. Harrison Industries was no longer just about making money at any cost. It was about making money while making the world better. The transformation had been noticed by the business press. Forbes had run a cover story about the Richardson Revolution, calling Naomi one of the most promising young CEOs in the country. The Wall Street Journal had praised her turnaround of the company as a masterclass in ethical leadership. But the best part of the whole situation was watching how it affected Brandon and Rebecca. Rebecca had been arrested the previous month on charges of securities fraud, embezzlement, and insider trading. She was facing up to 20 years in federal prison, and her legal fees had already bankrupted her. The woman who had once been one of the most powerful executives in the city was now living in a studio apartment and working as a paralegal to pay her lawyers. Brandon's situation was almost worse. He had been arrested as well, but his charges were less severe than Rebecca's. However, he had been completely blacklisted from the corporate world. No respectable company would hire him, and he had been forced to take a job selling insurance for a fraction of his former salary. The divorce had been finalized 6 weeks ago, and Brandon had walked away with almost nothing. Since Naomi had moved out before he knew about her inheritance, he had no claim to any of her assets. Meanwhile, his own assets had been frozen pending the criminal trial. Naomi occasionally saw items about him in the local business newsletter. He had tried to start his own consulting firm, but it had failed when potential clients learned about his legal troubles. He had been spotted working at a car dealership, then at a real estate office, each job lasting only a few weeks before his reputation caught up with him. But the most satisfying moment had come 2 weeks ago, when Naomi was having lunch at the city's most exclusive restaurant. She had been celebrating the signing of a major new client when she spotted a familiar figure at the host's stand. Brandon was standing there in an ill-fitting suit, clearly asking about job openings. The maitre d' was politely but firmly explaining that they weren't hiring. As Brandon turned to leave, his eyes met Naomi's across the restaurant. For a moment they just stared at each other. Naomi sitting at the best table in the house, wearing designer clothes and discussing million-dollar deals. Brandon looking desperate and defeated, clearly struggling just to find work. He had started to approach her table, but Naomi had simply looked away and continued her conversation. Whatever he had wanted to say to her, she had no interest in hearing it. Now, as she prepared for tomorrow's board vote, Naomi reflected on how completely her life had changed. 8 months ago, she had been a housewife who thought her biggest problem was her husband working too much. Today, she was about to become the owner of a company worth over $500 million. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jerome, "Dinner tonight to celebrate tomorrow's vote?" She smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. You're buying, though I'll be unemployed after tomorrow." It was a joke, of course. Once she owned Harrison Industries outright, she could restructure it however she wanted. She was planning to merge it with Richardson Investments to create one of the largest ethical investment firms in the country. The combined company would be worth over $700 million, making Naomi one of the wealthiest people in the state. Not bad for a woman who 8 months ago had been financially dependent on her cheating husband. That evening, Jerome took her to the same restaurant where she had seen Brandon job hunting. They sat at the same table where she had ignored her ex-husband's desperate attempt to approach her. "I have to ask," Jerome said over champagne, "are you happy? I mean, really happy? You've gotten everything you wanted, but was it worth it?" Naomi considered the question seriously. Was she happy? She was successful, powerful, and wealthy beyond her dreams. She had gotten complete revenge on the people who had betrayed and humiliated her. But was that the same thing as happiness? "I'm proud of what I've accomplished," she said finally. "I'm proud that I didn't just roll over and let them destroy me. I'm proud that I built something meaningful from the pieces of my broken life." "That's not what I asked." Jerome had always been able to see through her defenses. It was one of the things she valued most about their friendship. "I'm getting there," she admitted. "The revenge part felt good, but it's not what makes me happy day to day. What makes me happy is running a company that actually helps people. It's knowing that I'm providing good jobs and making ethical investments. It's feeling like I'm making a difference." "And personally? Are you ready to start thinking about your personal life again?" Naomi looked across the table at Jerome, really looking at him for the first time in months. He was handsome, successful, and had been nothing but supportive through the worst period of her life. He had also been patient with her while she focused on building her empire and getting her revenge. "I think I might be," she said softly. Jerome reached across the table and took her hand. "Good. Because I've been waiting for you to be ready." As they sat there holding hands in the restaurant where Brandon had begged for work just 2 weeks earlier, Naomi felt something she hadn't experienced in almost a year: genuine happiness. Not the satisfaction of revenge or the thrill of success, but simple contentment with where her life was heading. Tomorrow she would own Harrison Industries completely. But tonight, she was just a woman having dinner with a man who cared about her. And for the first time since her marriage ended, that felt like enough. The Harrison Industries shareholders meeting was packed with reporters, investors, and employees who had all heard about the dramatic changes coming to the company. Naomi sat at the head of the conference table, wearing a navy blue suit that had belonged to her grandmother. It felt fitting to wear something that connected her to the woman who had made all of this possible. The board vote was unanimous. Richardson Investments' acquisition of Harrison Industries was approved. and Naomi officially became the sole owner of a company worth over $500 million. The transformation from betrayed housewife to corporate mogul was complete. As the meeting broke up and reporters swarmed around her for interviews, Naomi felt a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of anything she set her mind to. She was wrapping up her final interview when her assistant approached with a concerned expression. "Ms. Richardson, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent and personal." Naomi looked toward the lobby and saw Brandon standing there, looking more desperate than she had ever seen him. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was unkempt, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Tell him I'm busy. I tried, but he says he's not leaving until he talks to you. He's been here for 3 hours. Naomi sighed. She had avoided this confrontation for months, but apparently it was inevitable. "Fine. Give me 5 minutes, then send him to my office." Her office on the 40th floor was a stark contrast to the modest suburban house where she had lived with Brandon. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the furniture was elegant and expensive. Everything about the space screamed success and power. Brandon knocked tentatively on the door and entered when she called out. He looked around the office with obvious amazement, taking in the expensive artwork and the view. "Nice office," he said weakly. "Thank you. You have 10 minutes. Make it count." Brandon sat down across from her desk and for a moment he just stared at her. "I don't even know where to start. How about with an apology?" "I'm sorry, Naomi. I'm so sorry for everything. I know I hurt you, I know I humiliated you, and I know I destroyed our marriage. But I never meant for things to go this far." Naomi leaned back in her chair and studied him. He looked genuinely remorseful, but she had seen him lie too many times to trust his expressions. "You never meant for what to go this far. You never meant to get caught. I never meant to hurt you this badly. The thing with Rebecca, it started as just a stupid mistake and then it got out of control. A mistake that lasted over a year? A mistake that involved securities fraud and insider trading? A mistake that ended with you proposing to her in front of 200 people? Brandon winced. "I know how it looks, but it looks like you calculated every move you made. It looks like you used me to advance your career and then discarded me when you found someone more useful." "That's not true. I loved you, Naomi. I still love you." The words hung in the air between them. 6 months ago they might have meant something to her. Now they just sounded pathetic. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have cheated on me for a year. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let me find out about your affair by watching you propose to another woman." "I was going to tell you. I was trying to find the right way." "Stop." Naomi held up her hand. "Just stop lying. Even now, even after everything that's happened, you're still lying to me." Brandon's shoulders sagged in defeat. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth. For once in your life, just tell me the truth." He was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You're right. I used you. I married you because you were safe and supportive and I knew you would help me build my career. And when Rebecca offered me something better, I took it without thinking about what it would do to you." Finally, honesty. It hurt to hear, but it was also a relief. "And the proposal? The public humiliation. That was Rebecca's idea. She thought it would be romantic. I went along with it because I was a coward. I didn't want to have the conversation with you, so I thought if I made it public, it would force the issue." Naomi nodded slowly. It was exactly what she had suspected, but hearing him admit it was oddly satisfying. "So what do you want from me now, Brandon? Money? A job? A reference?" He looked up at her with something that might have been hope. "I want another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to try to make things right between us." Naomi almost laughed. The audacity was incredible. "Another chance? Brandon, you're facing federal charges for securities fraud. Your career is over. Your reputation is destroyed. You have nothing to offer me. I know I made mistakes. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to humiliate me. And now you're living with the consequences of those choices. But you won, Naomi. Look at all this." He gestured around the office. "You have everything now. You're successful and powerful and wealthy. You don't need to keep punishing me." "Punishing you?" Naomi stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city spread below her. "Brandon, I didn't do any of this to punish you. I did it to save myself." "What do you mean?" She turned back to face him. "When you proposed to Rebecca that night, you broke something inside me. Not just my heart, but my sense of who I was. I had spent 8 years defining myself as your wife, supporting your dreams, making your success my success. And in one moment, you showed me that none of that mattered to you. It did matter. No, it didn't. If it had mattered, you would have treated me differently. So I had to figure out who I was without you. I had to build something that was mine. And you did. You built an empire. I built a life, she corrected. The empire is just part of it. I also built relationships with people who respect me. I built a company that reflects my values. I built a future that I'm excited about. Brandon was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, he sounded defeated. So there's no chance for us? No possibility of starting over? No, Brandon. There isn't. Because you can't forgive me? Because I don't want to. I don't want to go back to being the woman I was when I was married to you. I like who I am now. She walked back to her desk and sat down, clearly signaling that the conversation was over. I'm sorry for how everything turned out, she said, not unkindly. I hope you figure out how to rebuild your life. But it's going to have to be without me. Brandon stood up slowly, looking around the office one more time. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You always were stronger than I gave you credit for. Goodbye, Brandon. After he left, Naomi sat alone in her office for a few minutes, processing the conversation. She had expected to feel angry or sad or vindicated. Instead, she just felt finished. The chapter of her life that had included Brandon Thompson was officially closed. Everything that came next would be entirely hers to write. 6 months later, Naomi stood on the balcony of her grandmother's mansion, looking out at the garden where she was hosting a charity gala for her foundation. The event was raising money for women who were rebuilding their lives after difficult divorces, and the turnout had exceeded her expectations. Richardson Holdings, the merged company that combined her grandmother's investment firm with the former Harrison Industries, had become one of the most successful and respected businesses in the region. Under Naomi's leadership, the company had grown to be worth over $800 million, and she had been named Businesswoman of the Year by 3 different magazines. But more importantly, she had built exactly the kind of life she wanted. The company reflected her values, investing only in businesses that treated their employees well and contributed positively to their communities. She had created hundreds of jobs and helped launch dozens of startups run by women and minorities. Quite a turnout, Jerome said, joining her on the balcony. He was wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo and looked more handsome than ever. Your speech was amazing, Naomi replied, adjusting his tie. I think you convinced at least 10 people to write bigger checks. Jerome had become more than just her oldest friend. Over the past year, their relationship had gradually evolved into something deeper. It had been slow and careful, both of them aware that Naomi needed time to heal from her marriage. But what they had built together was solid and real. Have I mentioned lately that I'm proud of you? He asked, pulling her close. Only every day. Good. Because what you've accomplished is incredible. Not just the business success, but the way you've turned your pain into something that helps other people. Naomi looked down at the garden, where 50 women were mingling and sharing their stories. Some were recent divorcees just starting to rebuild. Others were years into their new lives and serving as mentors. All of them had found strength they didn't know they had. It helps me too, she admitted. Knowing that other women don't have to feel as powerless as I felt that night. She thought about the woman she had been 18 months ago, watching her husband propose to another woman and feeling like her world was ending. That woman couldn't have imagined the life Naomi was living now. Any regrets? Jerome asked. It was a question she had asked herself many times over the past year. She had hurt Brandon financially and professionally, probably more than he deserved. But she had also protected other potential victims and built something meaningful from the ashes of her old life. No, she said after a moment. I wish things had happened differently, but I don't regret how I handled them. And Brandon? Any word on how he's doing? Naomi had heard through mutual acquaintances that Brandon had eventually found work at a small accounting firm in another city. He had moved away after his divorce became final, apparently unable to stand living in the same place where everyone knew about his spectacular downfall. The criminal charges had been dropped in exchange for his cooperation with the investigation, but his reputation never recovered. I hope he's learning to be a better person, she said honestly. But I don't think about him much anymore. It was true. The man who had once dominated her thoughts and shaped her daily life had become just a footnote in her story. She felt neither hatred nor love for him now, just a kind of distant indifference. What about Rebecca? Rebecca Harrison had been sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for her crimes. Her company had been liquidated to pay back the money she had stolen, and her personal assets had been seized. The woman who had once been a powerful CO was now serving time in a minimum security facility, probably thinking about the life she had thrown away for her affair with Brandon. Same thing. I hope prison gives her time to think about the choices she made, but it's not my problem anymore. Jerome nodded and pulled her closer. I love that about you. You're strong enough to fight when you need to, but you don't hold on to anger. I learned that from my grandmother, I think. She didn't build her empire out of spite or revenge. She built it because she wanted to create something meaningful. Speaking of your grandmother, I have something to ask you. Jerome pulled away slightly and reached into his jacket pocket. Naomi's heart skipped a beat when she saw the small velvet box in his hand. Jerome. I know this might seem fast and I know you've been through hell with marriage. But I also know that what we have is different. We've been friends for 20 years and partners for one. I love who you are, not what you have. I loved you when you were married to Brandon, and I loved you when you were rebuilding your life, and I love you now that you're on top of the world. He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring, nothing like the ostentatious ring Brandon had given Rebecca. Will you marry me? Naomi looked down at the ring, then at Jerome's face, then out at the garden full of women who had rebuilt their lives after devastating losses. She thought about her grandmother, who had built an empire and left it to a granddaughter she barely knew because she believed in the power of women to rise above their circumstances. She thought about the woman she had been 18 months ago, broken and humiliated and powerless. And she thought about the woman she was today, successful and confident and surrounded by people who loved and respected her. Yes, she said and meant it completely. As Jerome slipped the ring onto her finger, Naomi felt the last piece of her new life fall into place. She had walked away from Brandon's betrayal with more than $308 million and a successful company. She had walked away with her dignity, her strength, and her future. The scared, dependent woman who had watched her husband propose to another woman was gone forever. In her place stood a powerful, confident woman who knew exactly what she was worth. And she was worth everything.